What if I told you that the most famous act of faith in history wasn't actually about faith at all, but about 3 specific psychological principles that modern neuroscience has now proven can literally rewire your brain's fear response? The story of walking on water isn't just a miracle, it's a masterclass in conquering the impossible through mental mechanics that anyone can learn. Tonight, we're going to decode the hidden psychology behind this extraordinary moment, and by the end, you'll understand why fear became impossible for those who mastered these 3 principles. Are you ready to discover what they really knew about the human mind? If you're building something impossible, this changes everything. The most powerful case study in overcoming fear isn't in any psychology textbook. It's hidden in plain sight, and it will transform how you face challenges. Picture this. You're in a boat in the middle of a dark lake. Waves are crashing, wind is howling, and suddenly you see a figure approaching through the storm, walking on the water's surface. Your first instinct? Terror. Your brain immediately categorizes this as impossible, dangerous, supernatural. But here's what most people miss about this famous story. The real mystery isn't the walking on water itself. The real mystery is what happened next in the minds of those who witnessed it. Traditional interpretations focus on the miracle, but modern psychology reveals something far more fascinating. When we analyze the behavioral patterns and responses documented in this event, we discover that some individuals experienced what neuroscientists now call cognitive override, a complete suspension of fear-based thinking that allowed them to participate in what they had just witnessed as impossible. This analysis suggests that specific psychological mechanisms were activated that we can now identify and understand. Peter, one of the witnesses, didn't just watch, he asked to participate. Think about that for a moment. Someone sees what appears to be a violation of natural law, and instead of running or hiding, his immediate response is, "I want to do that too." This isn't typical human behavior. This suggests the activation of what we now understand as the possibility mindset, a mental state where the brain temporarily suspends limiting beliefs and embraces expanded potential. We can interpret this as the first principle at work, the psychology of impossible becoming possible through witness-based belief activation. What's remarkable is that this psychological state was transferable. It could be shared and replicated in real time. Here's where it gets extraordinary. Modern neuroscience has identified something called mirror neuron activation. When we observe someone performing an action, our brains literally fire the same neural pathways as if we were performing that action ourselves. This creates what researchers call embodied cognition, the physical sensation of possibility. When Peter witnessed the impossible, his mirror neurons didn't just observe, they began preparing his own body for the same action. But there's a deeper layer. Cognitive psychologist Dr. Albert Bandura discovered that humans can develop what he termed vicarious mastery experiences. Confidence gained through observing others succeed at challenging tasks. This analysis suggests that what Peter experienced wasn't just inspiration, but a complete neurological shift. His brain, through mirror neuron activation, began processing walking on water not as impossible, but as a skill he had just observed being successfully demonstrated. The fascinating part is what happened to Peter's amygdala, the brain's fear center. Typically, when faced with impossible situations, the amygdala floods the system with stress hormones, creating the fight-or-flight response. But witness-based belief activation appears to bypass this system entirely. Instead of fear, Peter experienced what we might call inspired confidence, a neurological state where possibility overrides probability. This reveals the first psychological principle. Impossible becomes possible when we observe trusted authority successfully modeling the behavior we fear. The key isn't the authority figure itself, but the trust relationship that allows our mirror neurons to fully activate without interference from our fear-based cognitive filters. We can interpret this as a form of social proof for the impossible, where our brains accept new realities based on credible demonstration rather than logical analysis. What makes this even more remarkable is the speed of this transformation. Peter didn't need time to process, analyze, or gradually build confidence. The psychological shift happened instantaneously upon witnessing the impossible being performed with calm authority. This suggests that our brains are inherently wired to expand our sense of possibility when the right conditions are met. Think of your brain like a computer with security software. Normally, when you try to download something that seems impossible, your mental firewall blocks it immediately. But when you see someone you trust successfully running that same impossible program on their system, your firewall suddenly recognizes it as safe software. Peter's brain downloaded the walking on water program because he witnessed it running successfully on a trusted system. His mirror neurons essentially copied the code, and his confidence system approved the installation. This is why children learn so quickly by imitation. Their trust systems haven't yet developed the limiting beliefs that block adult learning. The first principle is this: impossible tasks become possible when we witness credible authority successfully performing them. Our brains are designed to expand our reality based on social proof from trusted sources. The key is having that trust relationship that allows our natural learning systems to override our fear-based limitations. This same principle explains why athletes improve dramatically when training with superior players, why students excel under inspiring teachers, and why breakthrough innovations often come from teams rather than isolated individuals. We're neurologically wired to become capable of what we witness others achieving, but only when trust and authority are present. If this is blowing your mind, stop right now and hit the subscribe button. Why? Because what comes next will blow up your view on conquering fear. And if you don't subscribe, the algorithm will hide my next secrets from you. But here's where the story takes an even more interesting psychological turn. Peter actually succeeded. He stepped out of the boat and began walking on water. For several steps, he defied gravity just like he had witnessed. This creates a second mystery that's even more fascinating than the first. If the psychological principle worked, if his brain had successfully downloaded the impossible program, why did he suddenly sink? The answer reveals something profound about how confidence and fear operate in the human mind. This analysis suggests that Peter experienced what cognitive psychologists now call cognitive interference, when conscious thought disrupts unconscious competence. It's the same phenomenon that causes experienced drivers to crash when they overthink simple maneuvers, or professional athletes to choke under pressure. Peter was successfully walking on water while in what we might call flow state, that psychological condition where action happens without conscious interference. His mirror neurons were running the program flawlessly, but then something shifted in his mental process. The biblical account mentions that he saw the wind, which we can interpret as the moment his analytical mind came back online and began processing the impossibility of his situation. This reveals a critical insight about human psychology. Our conscious mind and our capability mind often operate as opposing forces. When we're performing at our highest level, conscious thought is typically minimized. The moment we start analyzing what we're doing, especially if what we're doing seems impossible, our analytical mind can literally shut down our performance. What's remarkable is that this same pattern shows up across numerous fields of human achievement. Professional musicians report that thinking about their fingers while playing complex pieces causes them to make mistakes. Elite athletes describe choking as the moment they became consciously aware of the pressure. Entrepreneurs often say their best decisions came from intuition, while their worst came from overthinking. We can interpret Peter's experience as a perfect case study in the delicate balance between confidence and analysis, between flow state and conscious thought. Here's the deeper psychological principle at work. Confidence is not a feeling, it's the absence of interference. Peter didn't lose confidence in the traditional sense. He activated his interference systems. Modern neuroscience shows us that confidence and doubt don't battle each other in the brain. They're processed by entirely different neural networks. Confidence is handled by what researchers call the default mode network, the brain's autopilot system that manages automatic behaviors and skills. Fear and doubt, however, are processed by the prefrontal cortex, our analytical problem-solving center. These systems don't compete, they override each other. When the analytical mind activates, it literally suppresses the default mode network. This analysis suggests that Peter's sinking wasn't caused by lack of faith or lost confidence. It was caused by cognitive interference. His analytical mind came online and began processing the logical impossibility of his situation. The moment his prefrontal cortex started calculating physics, his default mode network shut down, and with it, his ability to maintain the impossible behavior. This reveals something extraordinary about human potential. We may be capable of far more than we realize, but our analytical minds often prevent us from accessing these capabilities. Think about it. How many times have you performed brilliantly when you weren't thinking about it, only to struggle when you became self-conscious about your performance? The second psychological principle emerges here. Peak performance requires the strategic management of conscious thought. The most successful individuals across all fields have learned to minimize analytical interference during execution. They save analysis for preparation and review, but during performance, they trust their trained systems to operate without conscious oversight. What makes this principle even more powerful is its universality. Whether you're giving a presentation, having a difficult conversation, making a business decision, or learning a new skill, the same dynamic applies. Conscious interference is often the primary barrier between you and your highest performance. Elite performers aren't necessarily more talented. They're better at managing their mental interference patterns. The story suggests that the key to maintaining impossible performance is learning to recognize when your analytical mind is coming online and having strategies to redirect it. This isn't about positive thinking or blind faith. It's about understanding how different mental systems operate and learning to optimize them for specific situations. Imagine you're riding a bicycle. When you first learned, you probably wobbled and fell constantly. But once you mastered it, you could ride without thinking. Now imagine that while riding smoothly, someone suddenly shouted, "Don't forget to balance. Keep your center of gravity aligned. Maintain proper pedal pressure." What would happen? You'd probably crash, not because you can't ride a bike, but because conscious thought disrupted your unconscious competence. Peter's experience was exactly like this. He was riding the water perfectly until his analytical mind started shouting reminders about physics and impossibility. The moment he began consciously processing what he was doing, his unconscious competence shut down. This is why athletes talk about staying in the zone, why musicians practice until they can play without thinking, and why successful entrepreneurs often make their best decisions through intuition rather than analysis. The second principle is this. Peak performance requires protecting your unconscious competence from conscious interference. Most people think success comes from more thinking, but often it comes from thinking less during execution. The goal isn't to eliminate analytical thinking, it's to time it correctly. Analyze during preparation, trust during performance. If you're still watching, you are different from most people. Prove it. Leave your like now and subscribe, because people like you deserve to know all the secrets I'll reveal in the next videos. Now we reach the most psychologically sophisticated part of the story, and the mystery that reveals the third and most powerful principle. Here's what most people miss. When Peter began to sink, he didn't just give up. He didn't swim back to the boat in defeat. Instead, he did something that demonstrates the highest level of psychological mastery. He immediately redirected his focus back to the source of his original confidence. The account tells us that as he was sinking, Peter called out for help. Not to his fellow disciples in the boat, not to his own swimming abilities, but to the same authority figure he had originally witnessed walking on water. This analysis suggests that Peter understood, perhaps intuitively, how to reactivate his capability system even in the midst of failure. This is extraordinary because it reveals a level of psychological sophistication that most people never develop. When we fail at something, especially something that felt impossible, our natural tendency is to retreat to our comfort zone, to convince ourselves that we never should have tried in the first place. But Peter's response was different. He sought to reconnect with the source of his original confidence rather than abandoning the attempt entirely. What makes this even more remarkable is the speed of the recovery. Peter didn't need a lengthy rebuilding process, didn't require extensive analysis of what went wrong, didn't need to gradually work his way back up to attempting the impossible again. The restoration was immediate. As soon as he redirected his focus back to the credible authority, his capability was restored. This suggests that our highest capabilities aren't actually lost when we fail. They're temporarily disconnected. The neural pathways, the mirror neuron activations, the confidence systems, they all remain intact. What gets disrupted is our access to them, and this access can be restored as quickly as it was lost, provided we understand how to reconnect with our original source of capability. We can interpret this as revealing the third psychological principle. Failure doesn't destroy capability, it only disrupts access to it, and this access can be immediately restored through reconnection with our source of authority-based confidence. Here's where modern psychology and this ancient story converge in the most extraordinary way. What Peter experienced is what neuroscientists now call neural pathway reactivation, the brain's ability to instantly restore complex behavioral patterns when the original trigger conditions are recreated. This isn't just theory, it's measurable brain science. When Peter redirected his focus back to the authority figure, his brain didn't need to relearn walking on water. Those neural pathways were still there, still active. What had been disrupted was his access to them through cognitive interference. By reconnecting with his original source of vicarious mastery, he essentially rebooted his capability system. This reveals something profound about human potential that most people never realize. Your greatest capabilities don't disappear when you fail. They become temporarily inaccessible due to mental interference patterns. But because they're still neurologically intact, they can be restored immediately when you recreate the original conditions that activated them. Think about this in terms of your own life. Have you ever had moments of peak performance, times when you felt unstoppable, when everything seemed to flow effortlessly? Most people treat these experiences as flukes, random events that can't be replicated. But this analysis suggests something different. Those peak states aren't accidents. They're accessible mental configurations that can be deliberately reactivated. The key is understanding that capability and access to capability are two different things. You may already possess the neural infrastructure for achievements you've never imagined possible. The limitation isn't your capacity, it's your access to that capacity. And access is controlled by your focus patterns, your authority relationships, and your ability to minimize cognitive interference. This is why some people can quickly recover from setbacks while others remain stuck for years. It's not that the resilient people are stronger or more talented. They've learned, consciously or unconsciously, how to maintain access to their capabilities even during difficult circumstances. They know how to reconnect with their sources of authority-based confidence when interference patterns emerge. The third principle is this: your highest capabilities are always accessible when you maintain proper focus relationships and minimize interference patterns. Failure is temporary disconnection, not permanent limitation. Recovery isn't about rebuilding, it's about reconnecting. This principle explains why some entrepreneurs can bounce back from bankruptcy stronger than before, why elite athletes can recover from devastating losses to achieve new records, and why great leaders can emerge from periods of uncertainty with enhanced vision and capability. Think of your capabilities like apps on your smartphone. When an app freezes or crashes, you don't lose the app forever. It's still installed on your device. The problem is temporary access disruption. To fix it, you don't need to rebuild the app from scratch. You just need to close it properly and restart it using the original launch process. Peter's capability to walk on water didn't get deleted when he started sinking. His app just crashed due to cognitive interference. When he called out for help, he was essentially restarting the app by reconnecting with the original source that had activated his mirror neurons in the first place. Most people treat failure like their apps got permanently deleted. They assume they need to start over from zero, rebuilding confidence slowly and cautiously. But this story reveals a different approach. When you fail at something you know you're capable of, don't rebuild, reconnect. Return to whatever originally gave you access to that capability. This is why athletes watch footage of their best performances before competitions, why musicians return to pieces they've mastered when struggling with new material, and why successful people maintain relationships with mentors and authority figures throughout their careers. They understand that capability is permanent, but access can be disrupted and must be maintained. The third principle is your greatest achievements are always one reconnection away. The question isn't whether you're capable, it's whether you can access your capability when you need it most. These three principles create an extraordinary framework for conquering fear and achieving the impossible. First, impossible becomes possible through witness-based authority. Second, peak performance requires protecting unconscious competence from conscious interference. Third, failure is temporary disconnection, not permanent limitation. Together, they reveal that what we call faith might actually be sophisticated psychology. The strategic management of mental systems that determine what we believe is possible. When you understand these principles, fear doesn't disappear because you become stronger. Fear becomes impossible because you learn to operate beyond the mental systems that generate it. What seemed like a miracle becomes a masterclass in human potential. If these secrets blew your mind, you need to see my next videos. But only if you hit the bell icon. Otherwise, you'll lose the most powerful secrets in history. What is your opinion on the ideas presented in this content? Leave it in the comments. Send this news to that friend of yours who has a keen perception. This analysis is speculative and based on psychological interpretation of historical accounts, not clinical diagnosis or religious doctrine. The content is intended for educational and inspirational purposes only.